fellow crocheters, this is Sandra from MobiusGirl Design. Today I have a video for you demonstrating how to whip stitch the full and half triangles into your Marguerite blanket. So you can see here, hopefully by now you've completed the full motifs and the half and quarter motifs and are ready to start filling in some of these gaps. So here you can see my first triangle that I've made. One thing to keep in mind in making the triangles is that you might need to size down one or two hook sizes in order to get your triangle to fit more neatly in the gap. So that might be something that needs some experimenting as you're starting to make them. So you can see here that I've threaded my needle and I've left a long tail on my motif for sewing purposes. What I'm going to show you here is the same as what's in the step-by-step photos in the pattern, but just sort of demonstrated with me voicing over to hopefully make it as clear as possible. So I start with the wrong side of my work facing. I'm going to do all of my sewing from the wrong side. My first step is to take my needle and put it through the outside loops of the points on the motifs right here at the top. And when I say outside loops, what I mean by that is if I were to hold these motifs as if they were facing each other, with the right sides facing, there's an outside loop, that's this one, and there's an inside loop, which is right here on each of these. So on the blue motif, this is my inside loop and this is my outside loop. I'm going to do all of my sewing through the outside loops because that gives me a neater finish on the right side of the work. So my first step is to go ahead and pull my motif up taut. And now as I'm sewing, I'm going to just hold the adjacent motif up side by side with my triangle. I'm going to kind of pinch them together like that so that I can see what I'm doing. So I've gone through the two loops on my point. I'm going to come back now through my triangle. And of course, on the unfinished sides of the triangle, or by what I mean by that is the sides that don't have sort of a neat stitch pattern, I'm going to be sort of making it up a little bit as far as where the stitches go and what the outside loop is. But essentially, I want to make sure that I have, for each stitch on my motif, I'm going to line that up with one row on my triangle. So basically I'll have a stitch at the end of each row of my triangle, along with a stitch in each of the points up top and down below on the motif. So let me keep on going here. I've made now my first stitch through the top loops of the points, back through the motif, and now I'm going to start whip stitching. So to whip stitch, I go in with my needle from the left to the right, through the motif, and then also through my triangle. Pull it tight. And I'm going to keep on doing this down the side of the triangle and along the area between the 2 points on the motif. So again, whip stitching means that I'm always working in the same direction. So I'm always going from left to right, first through my motif and then through my triangle, almost like I'm making loops. So I'll keep on going here. You'll find that once you get the hang of it, this actually goes pretty quickly and you can get into kind of a little rhythm with it. I'm the last person on earth to choose sewing typically for a crochet project, but having experimented with a couple of different kinds of triangles, this was the one that I decided I liked the best because it filled the gaps the most completely. I'm almost to the end of this side of the triangle. So again, I'm just working my whip stitches. Each side of the triangle will have 12 stitches in it. I will do my final 2 stitches here. And you might notice that I've not quite made it into the end of each row. It's a little bit off. It's not the end of the world. If I had more time in my video, I would probably do this more carefully. But really, this is just a demonstration. All right, so now I've made it all the way down through the 10 stitches of the adjacent motif, and I've come now to my next set of points. And now I'm ready for my last stitch, which will go through the point, the next point on the motif, through the end of my triangle. And that's my first side sewn in. I'm going to keep working around. So the next step is to go into the stitch that is adjacent to this point on my next motif. So I'm going to go into this stitch from the top to the bottom. And that's just going to give me a little bridge over to my next sewing section. And now I'm ready to come in from the bottom to the top through the point and through my first stitch on my triangle. So for this bottom section of the triangle, now I have some nice neat stitches to work into. And this is actually a little bit easier than doing the unfinished sides. So again, I'm going to whip stitch, always going in the same direction, bottom to top, through the outside loops only, on both the triangle and the motif. I will do my 12 stitches all the way to the end of the triangle. And then I will have just one side left to go. If you're interested in some other triangle possibilities, there are actually some members of my Facebook group on MobiusGirl Crochet Nation who have come up with some of their own alternatives. If you search through the posts, and if you would prefer to crochet your triangles in, they've shared some ideas for different ways of making the triangles that I think are fabulous. And you are welcome to go take a look at those as well. All right, so now I've done my 12 stitches along the bottom, and I'm ready to work my last side. So to do that, again, I'm going to go in to my next motif. I'm going to work into the stitch right next to the point, in this case coming from left to right. That's going to line me up to sew my final side here. And to do that, I'm going to start again from the outside loop of my point and the end of my triangle. And for this last side, the whip stitches are all going to happen from the right to the left, through the outside loop of the motif, again just to show you what that looks like, and through the end of each row on the triangle. And we'll just keep moving along. One thing I've noticed with the particular type of yarn that I use, the wool, it has a little more give than this sample yarn I'm using, this cotton, just for these videos. And so when I finished my blanket, or when I had sewn all of my triangles in, there was a little bit of puffiness to the triangles in that they puffed up out of the blanket a little bit. I decided I did not mind that because, again, I wanted to fill in this space as completely as possible without any holes. But if you find that that is bothersome to you, blocking your blanket, washing it and blocking it should help to flatten those triangles out. And again, that only happened just a little bit for mine. All right, so for this last side, I do just 11 stitches because I've already stitched my point, where I do my first 11 stitches here. And that's pretty much all I have to do. Now I already have the yarn on my needle, so I can go ahead and sew in this end. You might find that it helps to kind of work the yarn through this first point stitch again, just to get it to lie a little more evenly. And I'm not going to sew this in right now because, Again, this is just my sample, and sometimes I like to take them apart to be able to show them again. So here's what it looks like from the right side. And like I said, you can tell that, or maybe you can see here, that this triangle is puffing even a little bit more than my wool ones did. So keeping a nice even tension on sewing is important. And like I said, if I were to block this at the end, I could get that to flatten out pretty well. So now you can see this cool kind of triangle shape that's made up between the points on the motifs and my filler triangle. I'm going to take a second here and come back and show you how to do the half triangles next.